So listen, I'm just introducing this in, and I'm just saying that, for some of us, because of the pandemic, we've probably been experiencing a lot of downstairs part of our brain hijacking our upstairs thinking circuits. And, so for some of us, and me included, I haven't been firing on all four cylinders, right? I found that my engine isn't really well tuned right now, and I'm limping along in the low gears. I've lost my race mojo. Now, and so, and the pandemic has done that for us. But now, hallelujah, we're starting to emerge out of the pandemic. At least for us in the UK, that's certainly a thing. Other parts of the world are experiencing that in different rates. But hopefully we're on the way out. We've got the vaccine. We've got other things. And now that we're easing out of that lockdown, how do we get out of the pit stop? Is what we're going to experience. What we're going to look at today. How do we shift gears again to get kind of that upstairs part of our brain back in the race, back with our mojo? We're firing on all four cylinders. And to answer that question today, we have got a real life ninja neuroscientist, Dr. Iain Price, in the room, and it's fantastic to have Iain here today.
It's good to be with you.
Fantastic, Andrew. Yeah, and we're going to talk about how to train your brain for change, really, and look at how we use those kind of happy chemicals. And I'll introduce Iain in a moment, but just to kind of say, look, if you don't know me, folks, I'm Andrew Jenkins. I work with leaders, I build teams, I inspire organisations around developing high performance teams, and that's what I do. I'm kind of known as the high performance teamwork guy, if you like. And I'm super excited about this new venture. I've just set up a new live stream, which we're streaming out on Facebook right now, called Live Leaders. It's brand new. We love your support on this. We're growing it from the ground up, and it's about engaging, dynamic, interactive conversations, kind of edutaining. That's what we're aiming at here. So we have the doctor in the house today. How you doing, Iain? You all right, mate?
I'm all right.
Yeah, so I'll just introduce Iain as we're kind of going along, really. So Iain is the MD of Think It Out. It's a growing business, and Iain's been really focused on the last 12 months on growing this business. He works with all sorts of clients in all sorts of different arenas, talking about neuroscience, using the brain for change, how to proactively use what we've got in our brains to work even more better at what we do, right? He looks at personality profiling. He's got all sorts of tools for that, and team profiling, and him and his team, are growing that business around that kind of model. So, he's really on it at the moment, and Iain is on top of his game. He's also a member of the Inspired CEOs, which is something that I've co-founded, and actually they're the sponsor of this particular endeavor, the Live Leaders. So it's sponsored by Inspired CEOs and my business, PDX Consulting. So Iain, how do we, with all the curveballs we've had, with the pandemic and these 14 months of attrition, we've had 3 lockdowns in the UK. It feels like 33 lockdowns, doesn't it? How do we sort of duck those kind of curveballs? How do we get out of the lockdown blues, Iain? How do we dance in the rain, as it were?
It is the $64 million question, isn't it? I mean, how can we actually get out of the funk? How can we actually more than just survive but thrive? Then there's some great news here, because what it means is that we're aware of how our brains function, how they react generally to, say, things like fear, threat in particular, but equally to the kind of the good stuff,
good stuff.
What's reward? How do I envision stuff, and even emotions. And I think, Andrew, one of the things that I'm more and more aware of working with leaders and teams is how important the emotional component, if you like, to how a team works, the culture of the team. And actually, there's a whole plethora of toolkit stuff that we've got at our fingertips about how the brain works. And some of that obviously is going to be about neurotransmitters that are in our brain.
Those neurotransmitters, those sexy things. And
sexy things.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because we've been so run down, maybe, almost sort of our energy levels are very depleted now. It's kind of easy for us to say, well, we've always got a choice, but we've been so worn down, we're so exhausted from being in this intense emotion. You talked about emotions. You know, we've had the opposite of those emotions, haven't we? With the feeling of fear, of survival. Will we survive this? You know, what's it going to be like? That whole feeling of safety. My whole business has fallen apart. I've got to repivot. There's a whole new rule book now. You know, and you know, that message of hope is really important. That actually we still have a choice in that. We just need to get back to that choice point, right, Iain?
Yeah.
You know, and
absolutely. I think that's, and again, I think there's a phrase that I use a lot, which is where the attention goes, the energy flows.
Right. You know,
and unfortunately, quite often when we see challenging times ahead, or even scary times ahead, you know, that's where our brain focuses on. And actually, what we're saying is that unfortunately, sometimes there's no way, or rather, it's much harder to see oneself out of that situation by focusing on the sort of the pit, or the you know, the hazard.
The amygdala hijack, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and that is a real thing. I mean, I know that there's a bit of controversy over that sort of term. There's this little thing in your brain called the amygdala, which
the almond.
The almond, exactly. That's exactly what it's named after, and it sits deep within the limbic system of the brain. It's deeper than the brain, and definitely associated with learning and recall of memories associated with danger, and that's an evolutionary
and it's
thing.
not just danger, is it? Because actually we can use our amygdalas in the other way around. I only learned this the other day, actually, that when we're centered on fear and survival, it means that our amygdala is fetching, exactly as you just said, all of those memories and those representations of what that's like, and basically we get more of what we're thinking about, right? And so, you know, our brains think, oh, right, we want more fear, I'll give you more fear, and it just carries on giving us the same movie, keeps playing over and the hijack comes
that's along, the hijack, isn't it? And it goes round and round.
And yet we can interrupt that with the same amount of energy, because that's a high energy state, even though it's kind of a low energy state, but it's still intense, right? And we can interrupt that with another intense state, which is more positive. Like it's going, yes, come on, we can do this. And I think that's where people have met the survival repivoting in this post-pandemic world, is kind of go, look, it ain't going to snap back, is it? And we'll talk about that in a moment. So actually, I need to do something rather than wait it out. I need to do something different. And yes, I need to get going. And yes, I need to do this. And that interrupts the pattern. Is that right, Iain?
Absolutely. And I think what's amazing, Andrew, and you know this as well, working with clients actually, and for yourself, is that you don't need a lot of that to actually start to get out of that situation, that funk that you might be in. And there is definitely space to fake it, to make it, and then become it, which is the next part, which is how when we start to see opportunity, or rather focus on opportunity. Guess what? Well, there's a part of the brain called the reticular activating system, and that part of the brain is another one. But it's just more of a way of saying it's a circuitry. And again, this isn't all models are fallible. Some are useful. A lovely George Box quote. So even this is only what our approximation is of what this circuitry does and is, but we know it exists. And then here's the thing: whenever we focus on something and see that is the key posh word is salient, relevant to us and our values and everything else that we're trying to do, our brain will then go, oh, okay, next time that sort of thing pops up, I will really see it, and it will filter out of the stuff. And really, the best example, a prof gave this to me, and I think it's a great one. He said, look, I really want to get a washing machine, but I only wanted to get a washing machine this week. And he says, amazing, like now I want to get a washing machine. There are adverts everywhere.
Yeah, it's like the Red Mini, right? If you'd never focus on a Red Mini, you'd never see one. And as soon as you focus on one with a black roof, you see hundreds of them on the road, right?
Boom. That's your reticular activity system.
That's the one. Right.
And this is the thing about
reticular activity system, right? Okay.
Yeah, reticular activating system. So activate when there is something that you really need to pay attention to.
Okay, so if we pay attention to a more proactive mindset and want to get out of the malaise of lockdown blues, we just need to focus on ways on how to do that. And boom, bingo, guess what happens?
And as soon as you've done that, and as soon as there's a more
cognizant,
concrete, exactly, and that's the reticular activating system going, okay, now I know what I'm looking
for. Because you've given it a new instruction, and that goes away, even though the amygdala is still hijacking. There's another part of your brain which is going to go, uh-oh, I'm going to look at this. So we don't have to have a monkey in our brain all the time, do we? You know, well, actually, there is an upstairs part of our brain too, right? So it doesn't have to be taken over.
Absolutely, and the caveat here is just, emotion always trumps logic.
Emotion always, yeah. So follow the thoughts through the emotions, right?
So again, I think there's two things there. There's one is be kind to yourself,
right?
Because even when you are trying to get out of this funk, and I'm pointing one finger out, and 3 fingers back.
Oh yeah, that way. Yeah. 3 fingers back.
We still go through it. Is that actually you can start to have that know that you need to do it, but it's okay to still feel scared about it. Yeah,
it's the acceptance that I'm right. Okay, so let's test this out. So what you're saying is, it's okay to be okay, and it's okay not to be okay, and that's okay, right? That's the kind of logic here. That and to get your head around that, it's simpler than that. That it's okay not to be okay, and that's okay really means just accept the fact that you might not be feeling 100%. Put your hand up to that and kind of go, I acknowledge that. And then that allows your brain to have the kind of little by little, moment by moment, every day in every way, we recontrol, and we find the staircase that leads us to the upstairs part of our brain to think clearly. Is that?
And it is definitely, I love that idea that this upstairs, just thinking about the cortex and this particularly evolved part of our brain. That's not actually just humans. There are dolphins and whales, chimps that share that as well, by the way. So, but it's that higher level of being able to be aware of a sense of self and a sense of past, present, and future. Right. And again, we both use that when we're working with clients. Yeah. And the other part of that then is to visualize what it could be in a positive way, and then if there's an element, I think as a coach, there's an element of hand-holding to a certain extent with the client, an element of shepherding, and there's an element then of saying, okay, what is it that you also need to, if this is where you want to go, despite not feeling okay, who's going to go with you on a journey on that? And a friend of mine, a fellow coach, he Mike Pagan actually talks about this, having your super team. And virtual board. Or your virtual board, love that. So it's, but absolutely, Andrew, I think that's part of it. So there's part of it. This is about recognizing you can do something and steer your ship, so to speak. Part of it's recognize that it's going to be choppy waters for a while, circumstance, and that's okay. So many clients I work with in that phase, and then it's on the other side. And
let's face it, although we're talking about yippee, we're coming out of the pandemic, particularly in the UK, and other countries are following us, right? But and some countries are in worse situations, etc. But it's more than just that, isn't it? We all kind of think, well, we'll be okay now. When the pandemic's over, give it another year, we'll all be fine. But actually, this has been going on for a while, folks. That if we just stand back a minute, and we look at what's going on in the economy, baby, we can see that there's been an old sort of the traditional hierarchical world of the 20th century that our economy was really established on has waxed and waned, right? And then at the late end of that 20th century, during the dot-com era, we got this wonderful thing called technology, which was suddenly boosted on, just started to accelerate. And so there's these two change curves. So there's this new economy built on technology and the digitization of everything and the mobile everything world that we're all living in. The old economy, which is waving with all its old rules, right? And we haven't figured out the new rules yet. And along comes this pandemic and kicks us in the teeth. But we're still really, if we just take away the pandemic, it hasn't changed that much, because since the last recession, we're still stuck in this change curve, this in-between zone between two change curve, one that's dying away, 100%. One that's dead. So we've been in survival for a while, haven't we, Iain? And it's sneaked upon us. And okay, the pandemic has kind of cranked that up to maximum volume, if you like. But we've been kind of in that uncertain period for a while, haven't we? And what sort of chemicals are going on when we're in fear like that?
I mean, the main one obviously is cortisol.
Cortisol, fear chemical, right?
Stress hormone. And I think the hard part with cortisol generally is that whenever it's in high abundance, and it's always, you can't even necessarily say it's a certain amount, it's just relative to the person. What you normally but the key thing there, I think, is that actually when cortisol is going through the system, you're in that kind of fight, flight, freeze, or flock. There are 4 F's in play. And whenever you're in that state, what tends to happen is, from a survival point of view, the brain's going, right, okay, we just need to survive this. So I'm either going to fight it, I'm going to run away from
go
it,
with the
I'm
herd.
going to freeze, hoping that play dead doesn't happen,
Play dead.
or just do what everybody else.
Just wait it out, right?
Yeah, just
wait
it
it out. Yeah. Things will...
And actually, that has saved my life. I had a bull charge me once when I was working on a farm, and I actually properly froze.
Whoa.
And the farmer told me that probably saved my life because I didn't move.
Because you didn't move.
So it's a real thing. And talking about chemicals, I think the other thing is that it downplays all of the other more positive, or at least the impact of the more positive hormones and these signals that are going on in the brain, dopamine.
Yeah, we'll come on to those in a moment. Yeah.
So that it's more of that. And I think the problem with that, of course, Andrew, is that in many ways, the way I look at this is it's like, well, okay, rather than being more creative and allowing my brain to have all the lovely nutrients going to the higher function,
the upstairs part,
it's putting more effort
in the downstairs part.
Into the downstairs part.
It's playing to the downstairs part, right? And that's all.
Absolutely.
Cortisol's not a bad chemical, but as an overdose, it's not great, right? Is what we're saying. And if there's too much of it too long, it destroys.
Absolutely.
Stuff.
Yeah, funny enough, that's a bang on. So cortisol's required in our daily cycle of actually particularly getting up.
Yeah. We need to get out of bed in the morning. Right?
It's stressful. Sorry, it's my
that's your dog's brilliant. They're under stress.
Yeah, so you get, and that's part of our circadian rhythm as well. So it's like
not all bad.
Lot of these things. I think it's not all bad. Well, and I think thank you, Andrew, because I think again the differentiator I think you and I would say is when it's very easy to think of things as just either or.
Yeah.
Actually, it's not that easy. But when we see the nuance, that gives us the ability to be even more deliberate and strategic about how we manage, how we think.
Yeah, and I'm sure you're familiar with the work of Professor Amy Cuddy in the States. Harvard Business, is it? Is that where she's at?
Yeah, she's done all sorts.
Really interesting. You know what she talks about this cortisol spike versus testosterone spike. Okay, and this isn't just a male hormone. We're talking about male and female here. We're not talking about gender specifics. But what she discovered is that, if we have a pose which is, downbeat and, our shoulders shrink in and we go into that huddle, that fearful state like this, actually, she's proven to say that when we do that, our bodies respond by spiking cortisol, right? Isn't that fascinating?
And amazingly, actually, it's not just that; it's the downplay of testosterone.
Yeah.
So it's the relative.
Absolutely. So testosterone drops, and cortisol rises. And yet, when we push our shoulders back, she's experimented lots of times and proven this theory. Superwoman pose often. How do we get into a better state of mind? Well, we just change our posture. Something like that, move our shoulders back, and simple stuff like that produces a spike of testosterone. And it allows our cortisol levels to deplete. I mean, just simple stuff,
And it's amazing how quick that happens, right, Andrew? I mean, I've worked with one client in particular. They were terrified. They had to do 2 talks in this conference. They'd had some really bad stuff happen, bad feedback in a part of the conference that was a couple of weeks before that. They got up, they started talking, and I said, look, great to meet you, looking at their book and that sort of thing. And I said, but I'm just saying, you didn't feel that comfortable. And we got into a conversation. So she was absolutely terrified about the next talk, which was later in the afternoon. I said, look, literally, give me 15 minutes before you get on. We went to a VIP room next door, did some power poses with her. Boom,
bang,
out.
That's
absolutely knocked it out of the park. And then she said, how the hell did you do that? I said, well, there's this thing that's going on with your brain, and if you want to work more, obviously, then we can work more. But it's so quick, and we can all do it. And actually, that I do it now. I mean, other than today, because I didn't have a chance. Actually, it was back-to-back meetings. But if you go into a situation where you think, I've got a meeting with my team, or I've got a meeting with a client, or I've got a meeting with a customer that I've really stressed about. Actually, just lock the door, shut the door, put the blinds down, and do the pose. And it's amazing because you're biologically setting your brain and your body to have a much greater chance of being successful. And go back to reticular activating system, you're more likely to see the positive things that are happening in the room rather than negative things. It's amazing. Just for 2 minutes of just standing.
Absolutely. And don't do this on the tube, folks. You're just going to look a right twit. Okay. So just a thought for you. Be appropriate with this. But do you know what? This reminds me of another story here that I was about to deliver the Harker in Spain, Madrid, one year, and we thought it was a world record to 800 people. It was the world record apparently was at that point 1,200 people, so back in 2004. So I was teaching this to a bunch of engineers in a massive tiered auditorium, and I went into the auditorium. We did a practice run, which went really badly, like what practice runs go well, right? But my amygdala started going, yeah, never any good at this, you know, and all those limiting beliefs that start to play up, and literally my legs are starting to shake, because this is a big deal, right? I mean, the Harker is a massive risk to try and teach a whole bunch of people who don't want to do such a thing as this, you know. So totally. So I was outside, I was just regaining some breath. I thought I'll go and get a breath, and I thought my fear circuits were absolutely on overload. I thought, well, what do I do? My subconscious brought up the compere, you know, the master of ceremonies. His name was David, calm as cucumber, ambled up on stage, delivered what he needed to do, never missed a beat, absolutely brilliant. And his body language was all centered, really easy. So I just started to think about him, and I modeled him. I thought, there it is, there's my answer. So I just modeled him, right? And I copied his neurology, the way he stood, slowed down my speech because he speaks a lot slower than me. By the time I got onto stage, and he's on stage, and we just 5 minutes before, he said, do you want to run through your lines? And I said, no, I'm fine. He said, you look amazing. I said, the reason why I'm looking amazing because I'm modelling you, mate. And he goes, woo. So we had a bit of a discussion about him, not about me, but about him. I absolutely knocked that Harker out of the park that day, and everybody loved it, and it lifted the roof off that auditorium. Now, the interesting thing is the Harker, you know, there's another way of, you know, not that you won't do that in front of a business meeting, but the reason why the New Zealand All Blacks do that traditional, you know, war dance, if you like, is it gives them a 10-minute advantage, because it gets all the chemicals right, it gets the neurology right, it gets them centered, it reduces fear from the legs, it pushes all the fear out, it massively increases the testosterone, and, you know, happy days.
And I mean, this is the key point, at the same time kicking in the fear in your opponent.
Yeah, absolutely. So transferring the fear right to the other people, because you're dead, you're dead, I'm going to have you, you're all those things. And that's what it transfers it all onto the other people, and they're sitting there quaking in their football boots, right, or their rugby boots.
Absolutely. And I think you've played in, I mean, the whole kind of mirror, obviously.
Well, we get mirror neurons, right?
There you go. And the mirror neurons as a concept are still quite controversial. But what we do know is that when you see somebody else, actually, even if you're watching sport, believe it or not, your brain is taking it on board and actually minutely practicing some of the behavior.
Wow. David Beckham, eat your heart out.
Yeah. But you know what? That's what you're tapping into ultimately when you're going, well, okay, I'm going to now more consciously tap into that energy. Process. And quite often we do know what we need to know before doing it, if we give ourselves the space and time to reflect on that. And I love that story, Andrew, as well, because you just kind of, you know, very real. We know this stuff, and it still takes our legs from under us, literally. But actually, just with a moment of going, okay, how am I going to orientate? And that's that check, that's that upstairs bit going, okay, how can I use what I know? And then boom, and you're in a different place.
Yeah, you know, and there's more we can do here. This is the interesting thing. So we talked about cortisol, we talked about testosterone. There are other happy chemicals, aren't there, that we can engage with, you know, that takes us away from our downstairs part of the brain and starts to engage our better circuits. Now, you've talked about dopamine and serotonin. There's oxytocin and there's endorphins, isn't there? So talk us through those.
Endorphins,
Talk us through those.
Yeah. Oh, crikey. Okay, so I think the thing is, what I'd say is that this is quite common knowledge in many sectors at the moment about what these transmitters are. And I would say, I'm just going to add a caveat at the beginning. They can act globally within the body and the brain, but they can also act really, really, you know, at small junctions between the brain. And you think that we have somewhere between 86 and 100 billion neurons within the
whole
brain.
Universe.
And we probably have at least as many of those are going to be the supporting cells we call glial cells. And then on top of that, you can think, well, every one of those neurons, so 86 to 100 billion, can have up to, I mean, it's a Purkinje cells is a particular type of cell, tends to be found actually in a part of the brain called the cerebellum, can have up to 200,000 connections itself. So this is starting to give you an idea, and we call those how complex it is. So it's not, I think there's a real danger in one way if we read a gross chemical and say that's just how it is. It's far more complicated than that. But that said, dopamine is particularly one as a neurochemical, it's a transmitter that's particularly associated with reward. So when we do something that we find reward in, I mean, that can be listening to music or singing, sex is a good one, you know, doing sport.
Brilliant.
All those things release the dopamine, and serotonin is very much about attention. Big it up. This is about business leadership, folks.
I'm with you all the way.
Totally. And then the serotonin is more about planning and envisaging something that's happening, but it also raises the mood. So things like SSRIs, so that's selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Those are antidepressants for you and I generally. They increase the length of time that serotonin kicks around in the brain between these firings. Absolutely, and increases the amount that there is what we call serotonergic activity.
Wow.
But what that basically means is that our mood lifts. So you've got the two really kind of the happy and rewards ones, if you want to use it like that. So dopamine and serotonin. The endorphin one is an interesting one. It's our kind of natural painkiller. And actually, one of the reasons that certain levels of high activity, you know, the HIIT sort of training, releases endorphins. You and I do this cold shower in the morning, and that's probably an endorphin hit, which actually becomes quite addictive because guess what? There's a reason it's got orphan in it. It's, you know, the natural receptors would associate with taking sort of opiates or morphine. It's just our own version of that.
Brilliant.
And our body will produce that usually when we're going through something that's difficult, challenging. But again,
like exercise. Cold shower.
Like exercise. But I wonder actually, you know, that story you were talking about, you know, as you were speaking, whether there was an endorphin rush, because the brain can't dissociate about what is physical and emotional. It senses that. I mean, you only have to think about, you know, emotional pain is painful, and the brain interprets it that way. And this is about perception. So that's endorphin really, and again, different ways in which you can navigate that and or use it. And oxytocin is the
hug chemical. We love that one. Spread the love.
which is, but I say this is actually more, it's an interesting one because I work with clients and teams in particular. This is around, and you've got to be careful again how you use this. It's the hug chemical. And one of the things that we're missing, particularly online, I think, is the contact that we have. Physical contact,
right?
And even just a handshake, you know, tap on the shoulder, but definitely the hugs, you know.
In person.
We get this massive release of oxytocin. And oxytocin is really important. It's the chemical that's most associated with a mother-child bond. So when there's a newborn baby, you know, in the arms of a mother, particularly if there's breastfeeding, suddenly the brain goes, right, oxytocin. And that
creates a bond, right?
Bond.
Beautiful.
Absolutely.
Do you know what?
And again, it's important. No, just say it's important because again, it can be kind of left at home with the tree huggers as oxytocin. But you know, if you want team culture, if you want people to be bound together and go through some stuff together, and you know, go through brick walls for you, you're gonna have to think about oxytocin.
All of those things. I mean, just thinking about David Beckham taking you know, I'm trying to put into practical terms here. You know, taking a free kick, you know, against Greece last minute, drops that ball into the top right corner. All those chemicals are in play, and just to kind of break that down a little bit. When I used to do a lot of work with the Coaching Academy, and I presented a program called Limiting Beliefs for them on there. And you know, one of the things that I did was a game called the Comfort Zone game, and where, you know, we put people into panic, comfort, or stretch, and then, you know, people would move in different parts of the room, right? And the idea was to take someone from panic and put them into stretch. Okay, so you take someone standing up in the panic zone, and then you start to walk them towards the stretch zone. And so really interesting. So you'd pick someone for a start off, which then spikes the endorphin levels, right? I'm just about to think that this one-to-one message is going to come back on again in a minute, so I'm going to have to press it to get rid of it again. And then so there's endorphins that go there, and then little by little I break down their goal, right? So then they take a step, one step at a time towards the stretch zone. Little by little they move from the panic zone, step by step, to the stretch zone, right? So those are little dopamine hits along the way. So it's like, oh, you've achieved that. Oh, great. Now's the next step, another dopamine hit. There's another step, another dopamine hit. So you get dopamine hit after dopamine hit. It makes you feel really, really good. So along they're going along the journey, their brains are already filling with dopamine, right? The other thing is that I get them to visualize at certain points. Now, when we visualize and we look up, what chemical does that produce? Loads of serotonin, another feel-good factor that envisions the future, creates a brighter future for us if that's what we want, right? So you've got all of those things. And then while I'm coaching that person, I'm also encouraging them. I'm right by the side of them. I'm walking with them as if I'm in their shoes. I'm supporting them along the way. Oxytocin. So there's sort of 4 examples of all of those things together, like David Beckham when he takes that free kick, endorphins to begin with.
Absolutely, Andrew. And you can't, I think this is, and we would say this as coaches, but I think that, and trainers and consultants, but the thing is, you can't shortcut it in a way. No. You've got to put that hard work in. And I think there's a key thing with the stretch to panic is that obviously it's the Goldilocks zone. What we really want is the right level of challenge. So at the right time.
The Goldilocks zone, absolutely.
And
that is not too much, not too hot, not too cold, just in the middle, right? Okay.
Exactly. Yeah. Absolutely. And too little a challenge. The brain really reacts to challenge. Yeah. Well, it's incredibly energy hungry.
Yeah.
So 2% of your body weight, roughly 20% of your daily energy needs. So the brain doesn't want to necessarily change. But what you've got to try and do is say, right, actually, to change, because it will, actually you need to stretch it and challenge it. But too much, and we go into that panic zone again, we can mix there and all that. Okay, I'm just going to start.
Just getting it right.
Too little, nothing happens.
Yeah, so it's just getting that balance right, isn't it?
So you have to navigate that. And again, I think one of the keys here is working with clients to help balance that, where that is for somebody from day to day.
Perfect. I mean, I couldn't have said it better, Iain. So let's talk about those kind of hints and tips. What can we, what can people do in their everyday lives to, how do they engage these happy chemicals? And, I was thinking, one of them is to take the occasional risk, as you've just said, get over that being red-faced moment and just take the risk. Go away from the herd instinct, be a rhino for a little while, smash that wall down, go for it. What other hints and tips might you have?
Absolutely. I think try new things. I mean, if I'm allowed to talk about a project that I'm doing, that would really, so there's the 52 project, which is very much about, which I know you know about, Andrew. The idea is small little interventions that we can do.
Right, small little goals, right?
Small goals.
Yeah.
Doing the plank, water biochemicals that are going on with that, a cold shower, getting sunlight, sleep, hydration. There's a whole number of things that we can do.
Yeah, I've helped you with those things, haven't I? We talked about the plank and cold shower.
Yeah, we have.
I do it every morning. And plank and cold shower.
And you've even been banned from LinkedIn.
I know. Showing my torso naked. Terrible. So, there you go. Yeah, reputation precedes me.
So no, I mean, there's a lot of things that we can do. I think the key, when we're talking about where do we want to go? How do we get out of this funk? How do we dance in the rain? It's about really envisaging what that actually could be for us.
So,
and it's that's part of it, isn't it?
Yeah. So small goals and then think big, right? Yeah.
And then, I mean, it's like Stephen Covey, and we talked about this earlier today already, haven't we? About start with the end in mind. Yeah. Well, it's allowing yourself this space to think how it could be, and I think, and that sounds very, very easy to do, and I know that it can be tricky. But if that were possible,
which we know it is, right? Hint, hint, hint. Yeah.
Because you have the most complex thing in the universe right
inside your brain. Yeah, more synapses than the universe, right? Than stars in the universe.
Well, there's probably more brain cells than we can see as in we can visibly see stars. Definitely.
Wow.
And the ways in which the synapses can connect, that could be well beyond the number of atoms that we think within the universe.
It's big number, right?
Complex.
Yeah, it's that complex. Wow, those are big numbers. Yeah.
But they're huge numbers. But dial back from that. So okay, well, you've got this amazing bit of kit that can do it, and I talked about this a lot with clients and to myself. your brain can be your best friend and it can be your worst enemy.
Yeah, depends how you feed it, right? What do you feed it on? Yeah.
Boom.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So it's about how you talk about, what things can we do to be dancing more? Well, it is about that dreaming and then thinking, okay, what the small steps?
Yeah, of course, because we can focus on the rain or we can focus on dancing in the rain. The rain's going to happen anyway, so we might as well dance in the rain, I guess. Yeah, absolutely. I like it. Okay.
And if you'll see that, I mean, then again, it's how do we see the rain? And I do try this myself, when I say, oh, the weather is awful out there. Well, actually, is it? I mean, it's rain. We need water for life. So it's how we see
Tomorrow will be a better day. All sorts of ways of looking at it. And I think one of those things is, for bosses, for leaders looking at it, you don't have to be the big cheese all the time. You can be humble, and when things go wrong, and be okay with making mistakes, folks. Because when we start to acknowledge the fact that it's okay to be humble, it's okay to eat humble pie, it's okay to be vulnerable, to expose ourselves, once in a while, as long as we don't make a habit of it. Losing once in a while is really good for us, right? Because actually we learn different things, and we learn to support other people around us, right? Other people can support us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's actually the way the brain works. It learns most by actually what didn't work.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, failure, right? It helps the biggest learner.
This whole thing about talent, and you've got to be a natural genius, and I think this gets, particularly again working with leaders when we do, up the pyramid, there's very few other people to refer to. It gets even more lonely.
Absolutely. And the story of the light bulb, right? I mean, how many light bulbs were invented before the light bulb was invented? It took ages, failure after failure, but eventually, ta-da, boom, there's the light bulb, but it took years.
And then when it's done, it was an obvious thing. But I think there's something here about connections and making mistakes and allowing yourself and your teams. I mean, this is all growth mindsets. This is character stuff, isn't it? Fail fast, fail forward.
Yeah.
And the companies that really succeed are comfortable with realizing that there is failure, but this is not. We're talking about failure in a different way.
It's learning, right? It's feedback, learning, that kind of stuff. It's not actually a failure. You don't have to stop. You just have to learn. Okay. The other thing is praise,
which again, this goes back to how do we perceive? How do we use our brain to see the salient things that we need to see? Yeah. Because it's the same rain that's falling for you and I, but I might be taking one thing and you're taking something different. Yeah,
and it's that choosing to use which part of our brain, isn't it? And one of the other things is something I talk a lot about when I'm working with leaders is, look, when was the last time you praised anybody? Or when was the last time you were praised? So praise-based feedback, folks, it's powerful stuff, and we don't do enough of it in our organisation. So get on with it and do some praise-based feedback, because it makes you feel good. It makes them feel good. It's like hitting a sweet spot on a tennis racket. Everybody feels good. The player feels good. The person on the other side of the net feels good. The crowd love it. It just, praise-based feedback really works. So that's another one.
Can I give you a quick, just be careful. Praise can be dangerous if it's just
overpraise,
either insincere, inauthentic. Great job.
Yeah.
Just
telling our kids they're good all the time doesn't give them the motivation to improve, does it? No. So it's not for all the time, right?
No. Well, I think it needs to be credible. And the way the character will say about growth mindset, so the idea of seeing failure as part of growth, and to accelerate that is actually when you're giving praise, and I think the key word there is see it as feedback. Andrew, you said it. So feedback is about saying what you noticed and why it made an impact.
Be specific, be genuine, be authentic, do it properly, make the person's day.
And give detail.
Yes, detail.
So not just like, because
nice
there's
shoes.
so many things going on.
Nice shoes.
Yeah, I mean, and then the nice thing is that you make the connection on the people's brains of why you understand why that is important to them. Yeah. And that's when you're getting these kicks of dopamine and serotonin.
Absolutely.
As well as, this person sees me.
I'm being seen. Absolutely. Yeah. And the other thing, of course, is reframing negatives to positive. We've just talked about that. I mean, that's a fairly obvious one, but it's when we're stuck in an amygdala attack, we quite often only see the negative. So it's actually taking time out, stepping back, getting someone else to help you to see, how can I see this differently, right?
And before anybody's, and the people might be listening to this and going, oh yeah, it's really easy. Iain's got that all sorted. Or
no, we all get there, right?
I have been in the place of a proper amygdala hijack, super depressed, anxious, just over about 10 years ago. Yeah. And I've had to work through that. Knowing how the brain works, that was really kind of a bit.
Yeah, eat your own food, right? Eat your own dog food, mate. Yeah, no, indeed.
But it is possible.
You can climb back from
again,
anything. Yeah.
Absolutely. And if you're listening to this and you're thinking, oh yeah, it's great, it's for somebody else. No, it is for you, and we'll both say that. Yeah. It's about reaching out to somebody, by all means contact us or somebody else that we can point you in the right direction of. Yeah. Little by little, you can change how you think, perceive, and enjoy life.
Bad things happen, awful things happen, tragic things happen. And what you're saying is that, and I know some of that circumstance there, that sometimes it isn't easy, but there's always a way. There's always a way back, right? And I think that's really powerful. Absolutely. That, Iain. Thank you.
And it may not be, and I think this goes back to something else, which I think is a real issue about what is success for a leader. What is success? What does that mean? How have I been fulfilled in life? And we get to this point, middle age to a bit beyond, and we start thinking, okay, have I really lived the best life? And the thing is, as you said, some stuff happens. I mean, the worst stuff happens seems to the most lovely people in the world. I don't know why that is. Maybe that's my reticular activating system. But,
quite possibly, yeah.
I think there's so much in that we can work through if we give ourselves. There's a key word here. It's actually permission.
Yeah, and it's also that our backstories are powerful, and they create the impetus for other people to really get us. So our backstories might be full of bad stuff, but the journey through that and the learning through that is very inspiring to other brains, right? To other people around us. It's huge. It builds massive amounts of oxytocin.
Absolutely. And how many times do we really engage with a film which starts there once was a superhero and everything was great?
Yeah. Then down it goes and then it goes back up again, right? And we're
well, it does.
That's the journey of a film, right?
There you go. So the story is, and recognize that as a strength. Again, leverage your weaknesses sometimes to be a strength.
And nothing lasts forever, does it? That's the other way to look at it. Look, this too will pass. This rain cloud will pass. There is a silver lining on the other side of that. We said that at the beginning of the pandemic, look out for the silver linings, because there are just dark clouds, but there will be silver linings. And in all walks of life, there are dark clouds and silver linings, and we can all experience the rain, but we can also dance in that rain. But it might not happen straight away, but we learn from it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you are struggling to find that for yourself, if you are struggling because you just can't see that, and I do know what it feels like when you disappear down
the rabbit hole. Yeah.
A
friend of mine calls it the dark dog.
Dark dog, a black dog. You can't. And a friend of mine who coaches people who have been for Samaritans and suicide. He says that, having been there, he said, look, there's this place where you get down this funnel, and you can't see over the horizon, and good teams build in capacity. You may not be able to, you might be the person who's leading that, and you are in that funnel, but you have good people around you who can see over.
Who carry you during that time. I love that. Okay.
And vice versa.
And so nothing lasts forever. Actually, here's a simple one. If you smile, guess what you'll get back? You'll get a smile back. So, even with strangers, I smile, you smile. Simple stuff. It fires up different neurons in different people. Make other people's day, and also, as strange as it sounds, random acts of kindness. You're buying someone a coffee in the queue because you've just overheard a story of or whatever. You just help someone out. You buy someone stuck at a petrol pump, forgotten their wallet. You buy them their petrol. Whatever. These random acts of kindness produce huge amounts of beauty in the world, and generosity,
and in your brain.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and both people everybody gets moved by a story like that, right? The petrol attendant gets it, the person who received it, the person who gives it, the story lives on and goes on, and then the person who's received that then gives an act of kindness to somebody else, and so there's a chain reaction of these things. These are beautiful things. And being generous, having gratitude, forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of the things that we find really hard to do, not just for other people, but equally ourselves. Don't have to regret. There are things that we can do, and speaking to someone who can help you over those sort of issues is really important. To reframe that whole thing. So listen, look, we could go on for hours on this, but there's a kind of, I think we've kind of covered a lot of ground in this short space of time, haven't we?
A lot. And touched on so many different things. I mean, so many of those aspects we could go into more and help you with, obviously.
Yeah. So listen, this is obviously on Facebook Live right now. That'll replay again shortly. I'm going to repost some of it on LinkedIn the edited highlights. It'll be on YouTube as well. So you will find it in lots of places. I can give you a copy of it, Iain, too. You can do stuff with it from your end. So listen, folks, I hope you've really enjoyed listening to this. This is the first guest interview I've done. In fact, it's the second time I've only been online. The first time was just to introduce the concept of live leaders. And this is really the first one, the inaugural session.
It's my first Facebook Live as well. Hence all the jiggery pokery.
Is it this way? Is it that way? Yeah, backward, yeah. Well, we're all learning. So yeah, my phone rang halfway through. Yeah, whatever things go wrong in live, it's really funny. So.
Growth mindset.
Yeah,
accept it.
Do you know what?
Be a challenge.
You know, there's an imperfect world, and one of the challenges I've got. Another great sort of chemical booster here is, don't let perfection prevent progress. Just go ahead and do stuff. Don't be a perfectionist. Get stuff right and do a good job, absolutely, but don't let perfectionism get in the way of you doing a good job.
That could be, imposterism and imposter syndrome. Could be something we could look at.
Imposter syndrome.
That is, it's fraught. I think it's a bit like there's a Mark Twain, I think, quote about public speaking. Go with me on this. Yeah. It says that there are two types of people: those people that are scared of public speaking and those that are lying. And I think imposterism, and I call it imposterism because I think most of us suffer from imposter syndrome in different ways. Yeah. And maybe that's something we can talk about, because actually
that'd be a great one.
Again, when you recognize that, statistics say so at least 70% of people that suffer from imposterism at some point in their life.
It's so true. Everybody recognizes it, right? Do you know what? That's a good one to talk about. We'll do imposter theorem. So there's another theme, folks. The other one that you and I are going to talk about is looking at, how economically things are changing, because we ain't going to snap back. We're in a new normal world right now. Things are changing rapidly, and not just our mindset, but the way we kind of think about the opportunities ahead of us, money in our pocket, all of those things are, we need to sort of reorient our view of the world as we move into this new normal world. So we can have a conversation around that whole thing as well. And Iain and I have been working on a blog on that very thing. So that's coming up too. Folks, thank you very much for listening. You'll catch us on replay. Please give us likes and comments and feedback. We'd love to hear from you.